Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another video. If you've been keeping up with this for the last couple of days, I'm sure this is not going to be anything new. You've probably already seen this response, but for those of you that haven't, I'm going to be going over it here and just then kind of giving my opinion on this situation for whatever that's worth to anyone. But for those of you that don't know, I will try to summarize it as best I can. Scott Cawthon, which is a name that you will be familiar with if you are a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's game series, had some controversy over the last couple days, especially this past weekend, when I guess somebody on Twitter decided that they had nothing better to do, and they went ahead, for whatever reason, got the idea to go ahead and pull up and see what Scott Cawthon was doing with his money, what political contributions he's made, I guess, in order to find out what his leanings are. Because for those of you that know about Scott Cawthon, you probably know that before he did Five Nights at Freddy's, he did do Christian-based video games. So maybe this person thought that there was a good chance that Scott Cawthon would probably have more, his political leanings would probably be more conservative, and as it turns out, that seems to be the case. But I don't understand why that is something that should matter, especially considering that Scott Cawthon's games, at least the Five Nights at Freddy series, to the best of my knowledge, have never really delved into any of Scott's own personal beliefs. It's just a series that is really just horror-based with a deep lore, and has heavily relied on its storytelling, and that's what's made it successful. You know, we've seen a lot of people make videos about the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, as well as their own theories, and it's a very popular subgenre here on YouTube. I've seen a lot of videos regarding it. I have only myself played the first game, but from what I've seen, at least in regards to Scott Cawthon, he's not a person that really puts himself out there, puts what he's about, at least privately, out there to the public. He kind of keeps to himself, just kind of works on his games, and that's it. So that's why it was shocking to me that somebody would go that extra distance to just find out what his political leanings are, because again, it's not something that, again, to the best of my knowledge, that he's ever really put into his video games. He's kind of kept those things separate. So he had this response to make regarding that whole situation. We'll go over it here real quick, and again, then I'll go ahead and give my thoughts. But it says, my response and maybe last post. This message isn't specifically directly at the Reddit community. This is just the community that I care about the most and where I choose to post these things. I never cared much for Twitter anyway. Twitter was where a lot of this kind of kicked off, where a person kind of put out there, they put a listing of all the political candidates that Scott Cawthon has financially contributed to, which again, I don't think is a big deal. It doesn't matter to me. But there are people these days that they get all bent out of shape over things like that. But we'll get into that in just a moment here. To say that the last few days have been surreal would be an understatement. I've debated greatly how best to address this, including not addressing it at all. But with so many people from the LGBT community in the fan base that I love, that's not an option. I'd like to think that the last 7 years would have given me the benefit of the doubt in regards to how I treat people. But there I was, trending on Twitter for being a homophobe, getting doxxed, and people threatening to come to my house, that's absolutely awful. No matter how much you might disagree with somebody politically, socially, even religiously, there should never be an instance where they should be harassed to this point where they fear for their life. That's just, I disavow that. Most people do. Most people that are rational will, and condemn that. That is not cool. That is not okay. But in 2021, that seems to be par for the course, right? If you just disagree with somebody, a lot of people feel that that's justification for them to not only try to publicly shame them, but to also harass them, and even in some instances that, you know, go to the extremes of bringing harm to that person, which is, again, not okay. That's absolutely disgusting. But let's continue on here with what he had to say. My wife is 6 weeks pregnant, and she spent last night in fear because of what was being said online. She has already been struggling with her pregnancy, so seeing her so afraid really scared me. All this because I exercised my right and my duty as an American citizen to vote for and support the candidates who I felt could best run the country for everyone, and that's something that I won't apologize for.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
And you know what? I agree with Scott 100% on this point. He does not owe anybody an apology for that. a lot of people seem to think that they are entitled to an apology from him based on all this coming out, on who he decides to support. Listen, if you put out a bad game, and the extent of your relationship with Scott Cawthon is that you have invested in his games, if you put out a really bad game that didn't work, then he might owe you an apology because he gave you a bad product. If you're a consumer and you've been buying his games, that's really the extent of the relationship you have with him. I mean, of course, he's been friendly and has talked to these communities, but if you're not joining him for dinner every Sunday and talk to him every day as a friend, I don't see where he owes you an apology. That's just, again, but that's just my opinion, but we'll continue on with this. For those who take the time to look, you saw that the candidates I supported included men, women, white people, black people, Republicans, and Democrats. I supported Kimberly Klacik in Baltimore because I believed that she really cared for the African American community there and wanted to pull them out of poverty. I believe she could have really made a difference in a time when so many black communities were struggling. She lost, unfortunately. I supported Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, even though I disagreed with her on several issues, because I felt she would have been a good and fair president. And yes, I supported President Trump because I felt he was the best man to fuel a strong economy and stand up to America's enemies abroad, of which there are many. Even if there were candidates who had better things to say to the LGBT community directly and bigger promises to make, I believe that their stances on other issues would have ended up doing much greater harm to those communities than good. All of this explanation, I fear, is wasted as people don't want to discuss with one another anymore. They want endless apologies and submission. People who are expecting those from me will get neither. And you know what? I agree, again, 100%, because these are his own beliefs, these are his opinions, and he's entitled to these. 100%. Just like people are entitled to vote with their dollars if they feel that this is something that's so offensive to them that they no longer want to support Scott. I'm pretty sure he's okay with that because he's spelling it out for you right here. Look, I'm just exercising my rights, and I'm pretty sure, at least again from what he's posting here, he'd have no problem with you doing the same, whether it be voicing your opinion or again voting with your dollars as to whether or not you want to support his products from here on out. So we'll continue on here. I've always been supportive of creators and have tried to treat everyone fairly and treat everyone with dignity and respect. I've never cared about anyone's race, religion, gender, or orientation. I just treat people as people, everyone the same. And because of that, I've ended up with a very diverse group of people that I've worked with over the years. It wasn't intentional, it just happened that way. I choose people who are best for the job. I treat everyone the same, and I ended up with people from all walks of life in my professional life and my personal life as well. That's the way it should be. That's the way I want it to be. That's the way I will continue to be. And I think that that is perfectly okay. That is absolutely his right. That is absolutely Scott's right in this country where we are free. So he continues, I'm a Republican, I'm a Christian, I'm pro-life, I believe in God. I also believe in equality and in science and in common sense. Despite what some may say, all of those things can go together. That's not an apology or promise to change. It's the way it's always been. And again, I agree with Scott on this because the point he's trying to make here is that if more people would just come together and calmly and rationally discuss their viewpoints, their opinions on things, why they believe what they believe, instead of just jumping to the conclusion that they already know the kind of person they are because of those things, I think you would probably see that you have a lot more in common with that person than you might have previously thought. And I think it's important to have these kind of discussions with people. I think that people can agree to disagree on things and get along just fine. But I know that there's people out there that that's not good enough for them. They want you to believe what they believe, or you're just wrong, or you're just an evil person, and that's really not reality. I personally don't care who people vote for, right? Whether they voted for Trump or Clinton back in 2016, whether in this recent election they voted for Biden or Trump, I don't care. Look, as long as you are civil, we could sit down and have a conversation about that, regardless of their belief, regardless of who they are in a relationship with, none of that matters. I think that people, as long as they're willing to have some degree of civil discourse and they're able to do it in a way that doesn't involve any kind of shouting or threats of violence, again, I think that they'll come to find, in most instances, they'll be surprised to find that they'll probably have a lot more in common than they don't in a lot of those instances. But there's people out there that, unfortunately, they're so caught up in this idea of just judging people on a surface level that they won't have those conversations, and they've already decided to prejudge that person, and not just prejudge them, but unperson them, not even see them as a person. That's why you're seeing a rise in violence against people that have these kind of viewpoints, right, that other people don't agree with, and that's really unfortunate when things like that happen. That's why the idea of, potentially getting to a point where we could see a civil war, I mean, I'm not saying that that's something that's going to happen, but more and more every day with the things that are happening, that could be a possibility. You never know, but hopefully it won't come to that. But it's a scary thing when you see people getting assaulted just because they don't align with a certain viewpoint. But let's get back to this here real quick. If I get canceled, then I get canceled. I don't do this for the money anymore. I do it because I enjoy it. If people think I'm doing more harm than good now, then maybe it's better that I get canceled and retire. I would accept that. I've had a fulfilling career. Besides, most things that people can take from you are things that never had much value to begin with. I have always loved and will continue to love this community and this fan base, even if someday it doesn't include me anymore. And I don't look. Five Nights at Freddy's isn't going anywhere. I mean, there's a very successful book series, children's book series. I mean, there's tons of merchandise, action figures. It's got an upcoming game. It's not going anywhere. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, people are capable of separating the art from the artist. But look, if you're not like that, if you can't separate the art from the artist, that's your right. You can vote with your dollars. And I don't think that Scott would hold that against anybody. He seems to be okay with people exercising their rights. And so do I. So I am 100% on Scott's side with this. I stand with Scott. I don't think he did anything wrong in this instance. And again, look, you're welcome to disagree with me, and you're welcome to disagree with Scott. And I have no hate towards you because of that. I think that's one of the best things about living in a country where you are free to voice your opinion openly. So I encourage people to do the same in the comment section below if they so choose. And again, I don't believe Scott did anything wrong, and I don't think he owes anybody an apology. And I'm glad he didn't apologize, because in a lot of these instances, we see people get browbeaten into these apologies that they don't really owe anybody. And for a lot of people, an apology is some kind of admission of guilt. And truthfully, there's nothing to be guilty about, because he did nothing wrong. So, again, you're welcome to disagree with me, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And until next time, y'all know how it goes. The hunt continues.